Everyone, and welcome to today's VOX Pol workshop on tackling online extremism in Southern Asia. The workshop will explore the digital extremist landscape in South and Southeast Asia and the challenges and responses to tackling online extremism. And we have a great lineup today with Ms. Munira Mustafa, who is a security practitioner and researcher with expertise in intelligence, counterterrorism, and countering violent extremism. And she has extensively studied Islamist extremism and radical right activities in Southeast Asia. And then we have Mr. Hari Prasad, who is a research associate at Critical Research and Analysis, and his research focuses on the Middle East and Southern Asian politics with a concentration on the role of armed actors and religious politics. Hari specifically has extensively researched on Hindu nationalism's use of online spaces. And finally, we have Mr. Janine Fernando. He has a background in peace and development programming in the context of South and Southeast Asia, and specifically he works in the area of peace building, Indian Ocean geopolitics, social media's role in democracy, politics, misinformation and disinformation and hate speech, sovereign defaults, and climate security. So thank you so much, attendees, for joining this workshop as well. We are going to start with Ms. Munira and Mr. Hari Prasad, and then for the last segment, we'll move to Mr. Janine Fernando. On to you, Munira. We are going to do a 15-minute presentations, but please feel free to post your questions in the Q&A function. Thank you. Sorry, you're on mute, Munira.
Yes, I see now. We're so between post-pandemic, still making the same mistake. Sorry about that. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here this evening or other day, wherever you are. It's 9 in the evening for my part of the world. I'm based in Kuala Lumpur, and today I'll be presenting about the digital extremist landscape in Southeast Asia, but I'll be commenting on mostly parts of Southeast Asia, but a lot of my experience focus is on Malaysia, which is where I am. So to begin with, I would like to demonstrate whenever people start talking about extremism in Southeast Asia, like these are the images that they can conjure up. Like this is what they think of whenever there's any discussion or debate or the subject of extremism on Southeast Asia pops up. Like we would draw upon images of members of Jemaah Islamiyah and also the Ali Kalora of the Mujahidin Islamic Timur. And there's also, well, I wouldn't exactly call them extremists, but a lot of people would like to call them extremists. This is the members of the Pan-Asian Islamist Party in Malaysia, also known as PAS. I'll get into that in a bit more. However, I would also like to make the argument that these are the people who are often overlooked whenever the discussion on extremism comes up. Like I'm sure many of you are aware of what happened in Myanmar in 2017, when there was a lot of a hatred towards the Rohingya that led to the genocide of Rohingya in Myanmar in 2017. There was like a lot of it was propagated by the Buddhists, who were very, very anti-Islam. Also, some of you may recognize Ian Miles Chong. In Malaysia, technically, he wouldn't be considered as extremist, but I think some people in the US, for instance, might consider him as one, because he has been responsible for pushing a lot of far-right messaging, very, very racist, very provocative messaging in the US. He meddles in the US elections, some might argue. And below are two pictures. On the bottom left are members of the neo-Nazi groups in Malaysia. They are part of the underground music scene. And on the bottom right is a kind of a neo-Nazi in Philippines. You might recognize the Philippine flag behind him doing the Nazi salute. So let's talk about why is this happening. I don't like to attribute it as a new problem. I have written an article explaining how this is not a new problem. It's just that the advent of and proliferation of social media has brought on a lot of these ideologies, a lot of these individuals, come to light. They're becoming more visible as opposed to before. So I'm going to dive into this a bit more. So again, as I said earlier before, the problem, the discussion, the scholarship on extremism in Southeast Asia is still very much framed on essentializing religion, particularly on Islam, and it's often framed as an Islamist militancy problem or threat. And recent incident like the last month's incident in Marawi, Philippines, where there was a bombing in the university, a lot of people are eager to frame it as an Islamic State related incident. And many of us would actually argue that actually they kind of use the IS group as a brand, as branding and also external messaging. But the focus of the conflict, the center of gravity is very much local grievances. It's Mindanao-centric conflict. And however, I would like to highlight that this also underscore the problem with the way violent extremism is being understood and addressed. And I think it's quite problematic to frame it as solely an Islamic problem when it can be very, very complex and nuanced. So because of that, a lot of the approaches and efforts to counter extremism in Southeast Asia, a lot of the mitigation effort is only focused on correcting the Islamic belief to just bring it back to what is considered as moderate by a lot of states involved. So Southeast Asia digital extremism, based on my findings, I've identified that they can be categorized as two categories: anti-establishment extremism and pro-establishment extremism. Now, it really depends on how do you mean by establishment. It could be like the status quo, or it could be like the main government in power of the day. So you have like the binary equation to that, right? And there's also the fringe groups. But based on my findings, the fringe groups they don't really pose as much as problem as a lot of the larger, more visible groups. And what I find the most overlapping commonalities among these groups is that they have the tendency to be very ethno-nationalist or nationalist. But at the core of their main messaging is about belonging and rightfulness and ownership of the land. So what they have in shared values is that they tend to be very traditionalist. They have a very conservative notions on individuals' role, gender's role in the society, and where everyone's position is in the hierarchy. And again, this leads to being very, very chauvinistic, and they can be very, very misogynistic. So they tend to be very, very anti-feminist, and they push back against any notions of equal rights for women. They believe that women's position has to be behind men, and which is why they tend to be very antagonistic towards anything that's considered to be liberal. So they're very, very homophobic, xenophobic, and basically anything that does not fit in their criteria of what they visualize, what the homeland should look like. And part of this element involve a lot of myth making to assert their authority and ownership of the land. From a lot of the narratives I've seen so far, there's a lot of incredible myth making that has no a historical basis, and weaving in the special position, special places in the society to assert their authority. Some might claim that we are people who have some linkages and lineage linked to Alexander the Great. There has been some incidents where they come up with that kind of myth, even though there's no actual historical basis for it. But basically, the goal of this myth making is to assert authority, the authenticity to be in power in the leadership position, and to establish their belonging and ownership of land. So, and what's incredible is that you'll notice that they tend to spike, especially during critical political flashpoints. especially like elections, and of course, like as you've seen what happened during the pandemic, and whenever a new government policy is being introduced that can be very controversial, that might favor certain groups but not others. And basically the point is, especially during elections, that they need to influence the voter choices. You're going to see this pattern, I mean, across the board. I mean, in the US, for instance, right? Like that could be a comparative example. And the point is that they want to spread falsehoods that can include disinformation, conspiracy theories, false narratives about the minorities or fringe groups of people, especially the marginalized. And basically, they want to leverage and exploit existing social features. So it's all about divide and conquer for them. And if anything goes awry in the policy or the rule of land or whatever, they just want to assign blame. So if there's like an increase in crime, they would say, oh, it's because of all these immigrants, all these refugees, all these foreigners, in our country. So again, oh, sorry, I think I accidentally overcopied from the previous slide. But anyway, leading on to the tactics and behavior, what I've noticed, what I've seen from my data collection is that to shut down any pushbacks or criticisms against all this hate speech, they tend to weaponize lawfare, which is like, because like in Malaysia, for instance, we have the Sedition Act. Basically, it is used to shut down any argument or any statement deemed to be very, very controversial or provocative that might jeopardize the social harmony of people. But this can be abused in some ways. I mean, the idea is great, but implementation can be very, very vague, and that's where the problem lies. So a lot of bad actors try to leverage this lawfare, for instance. And then there's also the element of red tagging. Red tagging is essentially McCarthyism. So basically, you want to claim that your opponent or the people that you are marginalizing, that they are a security threat. So you would say that, they're communists or terrorists. So it's the idea is that you want to legitimize any potential legal actions that can be punitive taken against them. So, and this can be problematic, especially because it can lead to discreditation of vulnerable communities. And this had happened in Malaysia like 10 years ago, when there was a panic over the Sri Lankan Tamil Tigers. And there was a lot of rumors that a lot of the local Indian communities are supportive of the Tamil Tiger militant members. So next, I'm just showing you some examples of what these look like, a lot of the messaging look like. So, I mean, some political party like PAS, they would, like promote they use red tagging, but actually red tagging tactic is not just exclusive to PAS. Almost everyone who are, very, very active in politics, they try to use that as much as they can. And the next picture shows that the assertion of the so-called Malay privilege, basically that because Malays in Malaysia are largely Muslims and we're the dominant population. So the idea is that you can't question our position in society, if that makes sense. So these are claims that these are some of the ethno-nationalist messaging telling a lot of the minorities that they can't question our position or our right in the society. And so these are some collections I've made on examples of hate speech online. So the K word on the left side, I'm not going to say the full word, but in bold black, it's basically the slur word for the Indian community. And on the right side is questioning if they're clean or if the food made by them is clean. And basically, it's just the idea of trying to assert dominance over them, superiority, and by insinuating that they're filthy, they're unclean, and we shouldn't consume anything by them. And the third is an example of lawfare being utilized. Basically, if anyone tries to criticize anything that's considered to be very, very racist or marginalizing, someone will say, you know what, you're not allowed to question this. I'm going to evoke 3R. 3R is essentially what we call the Sedition Act, because 3R consists of race, religion, and royalty. And that's the three things that we cannot question. And these are examples of hate speech against the refugees, particularly the Rohingya refugee who fled across Southeast Asia from the conflict in Myanmar. So a lot of a lot of these tweets are claiming that, you know, like they're beneath us, they're beneath dogs. They should be shot. They should be driven out of the country. We don't want them here. I mean, I'm not going to read all that, but that's essentially the kind of messaging that you're going to see that that crops up a lot in the malicious sphere of Twitter. So why we should care about hate speech is because they tend to have online real world consequences. And I'm going to demonstrate this use. So on the left, we have a picture taken in Myanmar 2017. These are men kneeling. These men were Rohingya men, and surrounding them, I think, were the Burmese army. And on the right is a recent incident involving university students in Aceh targeting Rohingya refugees in Aceh. What happened here is that, let me show you. So what they had in common is that a lot of this violence were driven by online messaging that inflame hatred and encouraging violence to a point where it's reached that point of permissible. So people are not going to resist against this hatred, this extremist rhetoric. It's come to a point where there's no longer any pushback that it had manufactured consent to what's happening on the ground. And this is what I'm trying to demonstrate, because we can't treat what's happening online as completely separate from offline, because they tend to snowball regardless. And that is the reality we're living in right now. So the inherent challenges that are faced right now is because of the way we define what is terrorism, what is extremism. And many of us don't really see hate speech as part of the problem sometimes, because, I mean, I get it. Some people want to say that, oh, people say stupid things when they're angry or emotional, things like that. But I think then there needs to be a kind of a restraint, a kind of a boundaries being set to respect all sorts of, all kinds of human rights. And I think part of the problem is that trying to achieve a common value by everyone that could help mitigate that. But that is a question but that is a problem, because we have weak institutions that's making it easier for hate actors to sow hate so freely online, and there's less pushback, especially when political actors or political players find it very useful to leverage these and to leverage and polarize and mobilize polarization, especially during political flashpoints like elections. And they find hate speech super useful because, and you see in this example in Trump America and everywhere else, that they will leverage all this hate speech to rise up and connect the grassroots. So the key takeaway is that what can we do about it? I think that PCV strategies need a serious reckoning, because we are not considering a lot of things such as, like I said earlier, but shared values in societies. We are still too focused on addressing it as an Islamist militancy, Islamist terrorism. But the reality of it is that it's much more complex than that. And people can join groups motivated by all sorts of ideology. And we can see that across the board. Some people join Islamic State, years ago, because they just don't like the fact that they feel like the minorities are getting the upper hand here. So they felt like this is the caliphate represents how they visualize the country should look like. And so again, like, my point is that when we try to construct our PCV strategies, we need to be very careful with who we are engaging, why we are engaging them, and who decides what is or isn't extremism. And again, disinformation, as we've seen online, is that it's a serious problem. It is one of the key vehicle for hate speech and extremist expressions online. So we need to demand for a better information ecosystem. But the question is how? Because policymakers and stakeholders have to have that shared values as us. So that leads to the next question: how can we promote better values as a community and society if we do not share those shared values? Because a lot of this is driven by prejudice and implicit biases. And basically, yeah, that's all of my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you. I'll take questions after this.
Thank you, Ms. Munira. That was very enlightening and really good there, highlighting how some of the phenomena is actually not new, but it's just that it has not been given as much attention as other forms of extremism. So we'll move now to Mr. Hari Prasad, who's going to share his presentation and tell us more about what's happening in Southern Asia as well. Welcome, Hari.
Thank you, everybody, for having me here. So I'm happy to be talking about the Hindu nationalism or Hindutva environment here today. So I think Hindu nationalism makes for a very interesting case study for a couple of reasons. One, there's a very, very large Hindu diaspora that is a big supporter of the Hindu nationalism in like the West, such as the UK, such as US, etc. Second, Hindu nationalism, with India being one of the largest internet using nations in the world with a very deep language, can be very, very prominent. And perhaps most importantly, it is itself, India is a global power, and this is very well known by Hindu nationalism to exploit this. And because Hindu nationalism have access to state power, this makes enforcement very, very difficult and has spread the message a lot more. So what is Hindutva or Hindu nationalism? Hindutva is an ideology that fundamentally believes that Hindus are a race of people who maintain that India should be a homeland for Hindus above all other religions, especially if you're Muslim or Christian, that you're seen as a populace, as an outsider. This interpretation is different among the various adherents to the movements. For instance, on the top here, we have the RSS, which is the largest Hindutva organization in India today. One of their main leaders in the past, Golwalkar, was a very, very religious man who, among other things, was a big supporter of the caste system. In contrast to what we have here in the bottom, Savarkar, who was a leader of the Hindu Mahasabha and the man who helped coin the term Hindutva or popularize it. He himself was an atheist and used Hinduism simply as like a cultural and political value that could unite all Hindus, and he was very anti-caste. So I think keeping these differences in mind is very important as we go forward. It should be noted that Hindutva, for the most part of the post-independent Indian history, was seen as a fringe movement. After all, the person who killed Gandhi was a Hindutva member, but throughout the years of Indian independence, where it was operating on the grassroots level and finding alternative ways to get its message across, such as adopting new media, it kind of fundamentally changed in the 90s when the main Hindutva party, known as the BJP or Bharatiya Janata Party, became a mainstream national force in the 90s. And by the time the election of Narendra Modi came in 2014, the Hindutva and the BJP became the hegemonic party in India. But as a result of just the messy politics of India, the BJP and its allies are fundamentally big and organization. So there is a bit like the various say the Hindutva, social economic conservative, businessmen, etc., who all support BJP for different reasons. So I kind of want to focus my talk a little bit on like what's going to be known as the trad and the right does, but more pro Modi club. So as you kind of see like in these two examples, on the left where BJP is seen as to help protect Indians' existence, but on the right, which unless you can see the comments, there are people who are calling Modi too much of a pro-Muslim or Maulana Modi. So I think keeping these kind of things in mind of how as people have become more normalized has led to these more extreme trends. So I kind of want to play this video real quick, but this is what got me kind of inspired by going into the depth of broadcastism. Okay. Came through properly. It's come by before, but first time I watched it, I was just kind of aghast at the very strange, very crossover DC and Marvel and the group Spider-Man dancing. But when you break down the lyrics, it's a very community-charged song, calling for Hindu power to build the temple Ayodhya, and so-called righting the wrongs of the Muslim invaders of the follow. And when I said it to friends, they're like, "Oh my God, this is a very, very like anti-Muslim song." And I think this is a very useful example of like this kind of aspect of online culture. You have these common memes, you have this common music. There's a whole there's a whole category called H-pop, where it's like bar music. And all this kind of plays a key role of like influencing the discourse. As I mentioned in the past, that IFA was a print movement, but they didn't have same access to the same media as they do now. So they relied on these two things. So I can help create a common culture. Like some of these songs can be very, very catchy. And making these kind of like fun videos is a way to reach new audiences. Like, well, it's solidify the audiences we have. And for them with this online ecosystem, we want to move beyond Hindu grievances, wherever they may be, to promoting Hindu for itself. So the largest aspect of the Hindu online is organized by what's called the IT cell of the BJP. And while it is the largest chunk, it's not the only one, and it's not the most extreme, but it is playing a really important role in promoting the BJP talking points, but also for us as journalists, for us as countries, engaging in troll armies, etc. But as a result of this thing where it's normalized and it's like the dominant political online force in India, we have more extreme offices that are emerging. These are sometimes called trad or traditional, who refer to as the more pro-Modi bodies as Raitas, which is a type of food that's like very, very bland and mild. And while trads are very anti-Raita and view them as not sufficiently Hindu or not socially far enough, you see like as a result here in South India, which is a very major pro-Modi, pro-FIFA source, that they try to say like, well, even if we all disagree with each other, we need to work community, which I think it's a kind of worrying attitude going forward. So there's a lot of different narratives in it from that like from this, from like the histories of Islamic invasions, etc. But it can essentially be broken down to this phrase, Hindu Kathir Mehe, which means Hindus are in danger. So this is the biggest thing for them, that there needs to be a Hindu state in India because nothing else will protect them from that. That Hindu state is doing because we have Muslims, we have Christians, we have all these examples of like so-called invasions in the past that are anti-Hindu, and all these organizations that are working against Hindus. So I think that even like this WhatsApp message about order to a family chat, it's calling for like we need to take action against now. The Hindu Kathir Mehe is not just simply a narrative saying like we're being discriminated against, but it's a narrative that we must take action, and all these other narratives have been more pretty well known looking pod come from the idea that all these other groups of people are taking action against us and we must do something. So who are the targets? Of course, Muslims can be, as maybe people here are familiar with, could be one of the largest targets of the Hindu nationalist movement. And this also includes Christians, who are a much smaller population in India, as well as occasionally other minorities, such as Sikhs, who are technically within the Hindu fold. But you also have political opponents, such as the Congress Party, which was the main political party that ruled India, also independence, as well as communists and leftists, who are seen as this clear anti-Hindu and want to erase Hinduism. Critics and journalists also can be a very frequent target, whether it be through like something like troll armies, trying to get their content removed from the online pages, or even like filing police cases against them for spreading Hindu sentiments. And then you also have Dalits and lower class, which is a big difference between, like, say, the right Hindus and the nationalists and the trad Hindus, where rightists theoretically are anti-trad because they want to promote the community, versus trad are much more proud of their upper class heritage and are very happy to say, well, we don't care about these lesser results through them. And then there's also like that act against secular Hindus who are not seen as being real Hindus, which goes along very well with their attacks on like tribal political parties such as Congress. And especially if you're trad, any other member of the right wing is fair game to. There's been increasing foreign connections in this. So if you saw the top two messages, it's a little bit harder to see in the slideshow, I realize. These are for both from trad accounts. One is they're both very emphasizing like kind of anti-Semitic imagery that we've seen in the past, such as and also just a view of like neo-Nazi propaganda, applying it to ourselves. And interestingly enough, you'll see they're comparing Zionism to Ambedkarism, which is like the lower caste movement in India. Even though if for a lot of Hindu bodies, they're actually very, very pro-Israel and are very pro-Zionism. So again, that's a little bit different, where they're adopting this kind of like Western neo-Nazism against the against views like we see alt-right in America. But at the same time, you see the more pro-modernity bodies making connections on the garb of anti-Islam. So we see popular Op India writer making connections to Tommy Robinson, and you see other people similar to that, such as Ron Banerjee in Canada, or etc., who, under the guise of anti-Islam, are making connections that like to be united on this, especially before the election. Geert Wilders was a very popular figure in nationalism. I don't want to say that this is like that's the thing, is that while these stance are being formalized, I don't think it's like as from what I know, super solid yet. There's still like more intellectual admiration for everything. And while I am discussing the online culture, I want to emphasize that the online and offline are not just going to disappear. With much of the Indian nationalist movement's lifespan, their emphasis has been on the grassroots. A lot of what we see there, whether they're defluencing, attacks against other minorities or journalists, have been primarily happening offline. And then this is going on the online. So we have here Mondi Monteswar, who is a so-called child protector, who was eventually arrested and had his YouTube channel taken down after killing several Muslims suspected of child smuggling. But his career came from like YouTube, but he was part of an organization that has spread across much North India, and that preceded the online social media spheres. But while there is like the unique online culture and online lingo, all of it's kind of reacting to what we see offline. And I just want to emphasize again that the ecosystem that it is today, online media is simply just one small part of it. So enforcement is a very difficult thing. There are existing laws against hate speech and harassment in India that are sometimes enforced, but one is of course very, very difficult. So as you see from like the screenshot grab I have, not anonymous, so again, it's similar trouble that's faced by everybody else in the other countries. But also it depends on who's being cracked down on. Some of these figures are very close to being in the Nazi Party, and in states that they control, they're less reluctant to try to crack down on them. Or if they do this, they're very temporary arrest or release. But we see like states that are not ruled by the BJP are more willing to take these actions to like arrest people, even if it's in other states. So with the Trans made this app called the Solar Deal, or bullied by it, but the Fox made well-known Muslim women online. But then the other problem with enforcement, that's for a social media company, is one, India is a very large nation with dozens of languages where even a lot of Indians do not know the other languages well in other states. So that makes enforcement very difficult. But we also have very big evidence in Twitter, Facebook, and all these other platforms that when they have taken action against some of these organizations or individuals, they have basically the government itself to cracking down on that. So I think this all of this what makes enforcement very, very difficult. So to conclude that, I think that we talk far right really dominate the national online political discussion and our hegemonic and Indian politics, which is a very interesting reason to look at this. But as the national has become more normalized, we're seeing examples of more extreme strands evolving, which is also coinciding with like more extreme strands evolving on the ground too. But something to keep in mind in the future is that what are the reactions to this? For instance, I mentioned wealthy power, which is the idea that most of them are like aspiring to be women. We see from Islamist movements in India, as well as conservative Muslims, this idea of Bhagavad love trap, which has been on its head. There's actually Hindu men that are trapping over both. So while actually emphasize that Muslims does not have the same state power or access to power as the Catholic movement does, it is worrying to see how essentially one athlete of the far right is going to be inspiring another athlete of the far right. I think it's going to be very important for the growing future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hari Prasad, for the excellent presentation on Hindutva, and specifically for highlighting that online and offline spaces are not separate, but they're very interactive. And so